Welcome back to the second session of this afternoon. In a way, I think that our task is going to be very easy because the previous panel has talked abundantly about the MOOCs and already given us some of the answers. I have a question for you. Do you think that the director of a hospital from 1914 would recognize a hospital in 2014? I don't think so, because medical technology has changed so dramatically. But do you think that a professor who taught at Qarawiyyin or Azhar or Oxford or Bologna in the 11th century would still recognize a university today? I think yes, unfortunately. Education seems to be the last bastion of resistance in our modern days. At least until today. But perhaps not anymore, because of the MOOCs. This is the new revolution. Every year, the New Media Consortium publishes a report called the Horizon Report, where they try to identify key emerging technologies. So in 2008, in their first edition, for example, they singled out the following three technologies: grassroots videos, collaboration webs, and mobile broadband. And in the latest 2014 edition, the big item on the agenda is the integration of online, hybrid, and collaborative learning. Is that what the MOOCs promise to deliver? I mean, for the first time in history, we have top professors delivering education online to hundreds of thousands of students at a very low cost compared to the huge bills of the Harvards of this world. And now we're talking about edu-punks, about edupreneurs. I think some of them are represented at this panel. And we are going to ask whether the MOOCs are the future of higher education. Whether names like Coursera, Udacity, edX, Novoed are going to become the new Yale and Princeton and Stanford and Oxford in higher education. I feel very privileged to moderate this panel this afternoon because we have four very distinguished scholars. I shall not introduce them in detail because you have their biography in your program, conference program, but just so that you can associate the face with the name. On my right, we have Professor Michael Jäckel, who is the president of Treier University in Germany, and who has himself, before becoming a university president, led a national e-learning project in Germany. On my left, right here, we have Vijay Thadani, who is the CEO and co-founder of NNIT, which is a leading global talent organization, and also co-founder of NNIT University. And then on my right, coming also from India, we have Ieche Saxena, who is co-founder and president of Avanti Fellows, a large network of centers teaching science and mathematics through innovative pedagogies. And last but not least, on my left, you've already heard him, you know him, we had listened to him yesterday, Dr. Mohammed El-Houhali, who is the Deputy Minister for Education Affairs at the Ministry of Higher Education, a distinguished physicist who also supervises the National Center for E-Learning and Distance Learning. And since we are talking about disruptive technology, I was quite disruptive with my four panelists by telling them that they would not make a traditional presentation, but rather we are going to have this session as a talk show. So I'm going to ask each of them to make a quick 5-minute provocative presentation to start the dialogue, And then we will continue the conversation among the panelists and most importantly, with you in the audience. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Michael to start off.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It's an honor for me to talk to you today, especially on this international conference. You already heard that I'm from Germany, and Germany is famous for poetry, and it is famous for reasoning. So I would like to start with a poem, but it's not from a German poet, it's from a British one, and his name is Alexander Pope, written in the year 1702 or 3. Be not the first by whom the new are tried, nor yet the last to lay the old aside. This is a very interesting observation made at the beginning of the 18th century. And if you compare it with the very famous forecasting formulated by Peter Drucker in the year 1996, I guess, 30 years from now, the big university campuses will be relics. Universities won't survive. It's as large a change as when you first got the printed book. You might think about the question, is my university, or is the University of Hong Kong, we heard a lot about this university this morning and this afternoon, already ready for this kind of change that Peter Drucker supposed. Now, I am in the field of e-learning for more than now 14 years. And I would say that the experience with e-learning I made is that most of my colleagues in Germany, and I believe most of my colleagues in Europe too, still do not have any concrete idea about what to do with the MOOCs format. But they have a quite good idea what to do with all the e-learning tools we already have, starting with streaming technologies, with video conferencing system, with wikis, and especially with a very comfortable thing, e-learning platforms that work quite well until today, and they are always developed in the near future. So we should think about the question, what is really new in the field of MOOCs, and what is quite common to those who are already working in the field of e-learning for a long time. And this is the reason why I have chosen the famous definition of Schumpeter, an Austrian economist who then went to Harvard. Innovation is the doing of new things, or the doing of things that are already being done in a new way. So if we look at the most popular MOOCs formats, we have, in fact, two different types. The first one is a very centralized, that's the right one. It's an instructional type of learning and is, in my opinion, an adaptation of a system of broadcasting into the field of higher education. On the left side, you see a very sophisticated kind of teaching or learning called the CMOOC. So it's decentralized, it's self-determined, and it is a kind of joint learning, and the focus is not on delivering knowledge to many people. It's at first the idea of creating knowledge. A good example for a CMOOC is the foundation of the acronym MOOC in the year 2008 by Dave Cormier in Canada. The idea was that the connection of all the learners and the teachers should create a new kind of teaching and education. And in this respect, it is really an attempt to realize an educational turn. But What is more popular today is what I would say is a kind of MOOC celebrities format, that there are a lot of successful professors like Sebastian Thrun or Michael Sandel who develop their lessons, for example, a lesson about justice, to a lot of people all over the world. And this is it's a field of a very high attraction, but it is not what someone believes is the central focus of an educational term. So if we look at MOOCs and their utilization, we first of all should think about what are people actually doing with MOOCs. And in most cases, it comes out of the regular study programs. And some, for example, in Germany, a network of the technical universities called TU9 are thinking about regional or national cooperations so that they exchange some courses in their engineering classes, and they also give the students credits for this. Another opportunity is to use MOOCs for the wide field of marketing, and by the way, addressing the alumni of a university. Another perspective might be the international dimension that is very popular for a lot of German universities, for example, the Technical University of Munich, who believes that this is a kind of format to bring the idea of this university into the world, and maybe it attracts a lot of students that will come to the campus and not to the click university as the forecast of Peter Drucker might suggest. So finally, I would like to focus your attention on, in my opinion, 4 important dimensions when we are thinking about MOOCs and what is the challenge of MOOCs to brick universities. The first is with regard to content. If MOOCs are the driving force in the field of digital learning, then the implementation has to prove a real educational term and not a kind of proliferation, a kind of Hollywood format, a kind of broadcasting in another context. In the social dimension, it is very important to look at the fact that, as George Carrot already formulated, that universities today are in fact multi-versities. The technological runaway train accelerates in this respect the idea of an open university. In the spatial dimension, we have to think about the effect of technologies as such. As technology enables us to attract new target groups, new areas of academic competition, think about the successful way Coursera already started, are emerging, and new modes of reputation will be established too. And finally, there is the temporal dimension we have to look at. Academic teaching and learning is changing intra- and inter-organizationally, and at the moment I believe we have something like a cultural lag, a very fast driving technological impact, but there is no good idea about the social organization behind it or the academic organization behind it. So matching teachers and students will become a big issue in the future. These are my 4 theses. Maybe we can come back to this during the discussion. And finally, I would say, as a president of a brick university, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jäckel. I thought it took me a few weeks to learn what MOOCs meant, and now we have to learn what X-MOOCs and C-MOOCs, and thank you for adding to the general complexity. Now we turn to Vijeta Dani.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, organizers, for inviting me to present my thoughts here. It's been a great conference so far, and I hope by the end, by the time I finish speaking, it will still remain great. So the first thing which I wanted to say was that the flat world which Thomas Friedman talked about has not really happened for the economy, but definitely it has happened in the field of learning and knowledge sharing. because now knowledge can travel from one place to another. A learner has access to any and every knowledge. Experts, on the other hand, have access to any and every learner, and therefore access, which used to be a problem with education, stands solved, at least in theory. Peer learning and collaboration has become very, very effective because there is always somebody who's ahead of somebody else and there is always somebody who's behind somebody else, so you can always learn from someone else. And collaboration has emerged as a very strong theme as far as learning is concerned. The third, the equity issue, because high quality is now available at really breakthrough costing, it is possible that knowledge sharing and learning and education, therefore, the online system of delivery can actually break the path. So that is as far as the flat world of global learning was concerned. But there are some other aspects which I thought we should consider to build a case for online learning delivery. First, and I'm not sure how many of you are aware of that, it's the size of the knowledge. Up until 1900, knowledge doubled every century. At the end of World War II, knowledge doubled every 25 years. Between 94 and 2004, it doubled every decade. Today, and by the way, this today is 2011, it doubles every 2 years. I recently saw an update. The knowledge doubles every 11 hours, which means last time when you slept and you thought you knew everything about this world, when you woke up this morning, you only know 50%. Now imagine the teacher who last night slept, he knows everything about the world, but today morning will be facing a class of students and he would know only 50%. And chances are that those students actually were awake while he was asleep. And there is a possibility that they know little more than him. Now this is a very, very important element to be kept in mind. The other element which has to be kept in mind is the learner himself. And the learner of today is the millennial. Now typically when we talk of education, we talk about all other stakeholders, but somehow we omit the learner. The learner is a millennial, and millennial is Gen Y, if you want to call it, but definitely a very different person. Some very important characteristics: connected. In fact, one way by which people define the millennial is that earlier children were born with umbilical cords, and umbilical cords had to be cut. Now, as soon as the umbilical cord is cut, a USB connector appears, because this person is connected to the internet from the time the child is born, and is very, very comfortable with technology. He also craves for change and challenge. His self-expression is very important, and I'm using the word he, but she is equally important. And the learner view their work as an expression of themselves, which means very sure of themselves, want flexibility, very confident, very impatient for results. And these millennials are actually making the world flatter. And when we consider education and education delivery, we need to consider this element as well. My organization, which has been around for the last 32 years, for us in a place called India, 600,000 unemployed graduates, and we wanted them to get onto their jobs in 1981 onto computers. It was a very difficult task, and we were in a hurry. So when we asked people, people said you can either practice scale or practice excellence. Very much like in the previous time, somebody talked about you can either be elitist or you can be mass or you can be delivering quality. We decided that we will go for the tough climb, which is practice excellence through scale. And that's where the role of technology came. The role of technology came because technology was visible in the very first lesson that we delivered in 1981 through a video lesson. And then as technology moved and became more and more affordable, we moved on to computer-based learning, web-based training, blended learning. And today, we call ourselves a global talent development corporation, where we not only teach IT, we teach banking, finance, management, BPO, we teach any and every discipline that belongs to the knowledge industry and the service industry. And the technology that we have been using in the recent times is what we call cloud campus. And I'll show you a slide of that, which is actually challenging the way education is looked at. So far, whenever online learning has been discussed, it has been discussed as a catch-up to an instructor-based learning. Cloud campus is actually challenging the way an instructor taught and is saying it is better than the instructor's way of delivering the teaching. And we have now 30 million learners, and 40 countries later, with a little bit of experience, actually can say with confidence what works and what doesn't. Another element of this is visible in the NIT University, which we believe is a university of the 21st century. 4 core principles. It is technology-based, it is research-driven, and we discussed a little while back about the Dutch university colleges which practice undergrad level research, and this is one of those. Industry linked. We not only believe that industry has to be linked in terms of placements, but industry has to be linked in terms of teaching. So we have practicing professors and we have professing practitioners. We have both sides equally participating in the learning process. And last but not the least, seamlessness. Seamlessness with the environment around, seamlessness with the institution, seamlessness with the job, seamlessness with the nature. All these are visible again. And again, online forms a very, very strong component of this learning. But when I use the word online, I'm actually referring to hybrid. I'm not undermining the role of the instructor, but I'm amplifying the role of the instructor. This is the cloud campus that I was telling you about. There are 7 components of which are active right now, but the strongest component which contributes the best is what I call the collaborative learning piece. And since we are going to be talking collaborative learning in this particular session, I will not talk more about that. Enough to say that in addition to collaboration, a new thing emerges in this learning process, and that is a self-organizing learning environment. The students organize themselves and decide who is the expert on what, and build a self-organizing learning environment which actually delivers more optimal results than anything else does. And therefore, Cloud Campus, as I said, is not just trying to play catch-up with what the instructor-led learning or the professor-led learning was, but it is challenging and in fact challenging the professor and saying, I will amplify your ability, and therefore the net result will be better than what you could deliver yourself. There are 3 major constraints in implementing online learning, and that's where I would stop. First is pedagogy. I think using the same pedagogy which we used when an instructor used, or using the same pedagogy which we used when e-learning was practiced, in a hybrid environment, you have to change the pedagogy. The second is the attitude of the faculty. So on one hand, academic freedom is something which everybody would like to respect, but you can't hide behind academic freedom not to give a change to the learner that the learner deserves. And last but not the least, I think the academic leadership has to really take a step forward of becoming more entrepreneurial than being driven by the rules and regulations which today dictate the future of academic leadership. We can talk more about that in the coming session, but there are just 2 points I want to leave with. There are big winds of change which are blowing, and we have a choice to build a windmill or a shelter. I would suggest a windmill. And therefore, what I believe is a hybrid online learning environment is not a choice. It's not something, a discussion point, it's an imperative. Otherwise, we will not reach the masses that we want to reach with the quality that we want to reach, at the cost at which we want to reach. And second, when we design such an environment, we are not playing catch-up with an old environment, but we are creating a better environment. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vijay. We stay in India. with ieche, but we move from the higher education to high school level.
Good afternoon, and once again, thank you for having me here. It's a huge honor. I think especially because I'm following people with a lot more experience at doing this than I have. Avanti is only a few years old, and I think what I'd love to take a few minutes to talk about is this really radical experiment that we were sort of pushed into running. And I think what we found hopefully has some clues to, which I described, what needs to happen in the classroom in terms of especially student collaboration that could complement effectively the abundance of knowledge that we now have. So the challenge with India, and I think with most high school classrooms, and I can convince you this is the last time you will see Spider-Man on the presentation screen, but is really that we believe that our teachers or people who run our classrooms need to be superheroes. If you take any profession in the world, there's perhaps no profession that requires someone to be incredibly empathetic to students, to be inspiring, to know subject matter, to keep up with knowledge that doubles every day, just like we expect our teachers to. And I think as a consequence of this presumption, in countries such as India, we end up with huge disparities in terms of quality of our learning outcomes. So in India alone, and this is sort of the premise behind which we started Avanti, was that there's 1 million teachers short in our public school system. So that's more people than some countries have. So we are short of 1 million teachers. And it becomes even more confounding when you say that those 1 million teachers need to all be 1 million superheroes. And the task of finding 1 million superheroes is a task I doubt any country is ever going to achieve. And I think it all when we started, it was all predicated on the fact that we could take smart and motivated kids, give them great teachers, and they would succeed. Unfortunately, in most academic settings, when you do that, when you give kids access to even great classrooms, we find that the vast majority of our classrooms don't succeed. In traditional classrooms, there's a top 5 or 10%, and there's always the traditional bell curve, and you find that the vast majority of your classroom does not succeed. And in many ways, it makes one question the efficacy of what we are doing in our classrooms. About 2 years ago, we started a bit of a strange experiment where we said, we can't find teachers, we're 1 million teachers short, so let's take these teachers out of the classroom, let's replace them with people who can handle students, let's replace them with responsible adults, and let's create a program that's entirely centered around students collaborating. So our classrooms were designed to have groups of 5 or 6 students work on subject matter that was designed for student collaboration and work together to create knowledge, as the speakers before have alluded to. And what we found was quite startling, which was that when we removed teachers from classrooms, but replaced them with responsible adults that encouraged collaborative learning, and if you look at the yellow curve there on the screen, not only did we perform better than traditional classrooms, we also resulted in much smaller variances in student performance. So our kids did better, but they also did less, their performance was a lot less disparate from each other. And the shocking revelation there for us, in this extreme scenario that we created, was that students studying by themselves were outperforming some of the most premium classrooms in the country. And I think this is important to ponder on, especially when we discuss the MOOCs, because there's been a lot of data in the past year and a half, which would lead you to believe, and leads many of us to believe, that traditional classrooms are outperforming the MOOCs, and they are, I think, in most settings. But what I would love to leave here is the thought that in extreme settings, when we were able to outperform traditional classrooms by removing teachers. So it's not really a question of how the content is delivered or how the knowledge is delivered. It's entirely a question of what students do when they are consuming that information. Here's a graph that Eric, who will talk tomorrow, often shows, and I'll run through it quickly, but these are MIT students fitted with electrodermal sensors. And the simplest way to look at these graphs is to interpret spikes as increased levels of arousal and troughs as a lack of mental arousal. And if you take a careful look at class, which is the yellow bars, you will find that it's largely flat. If you take a careful look at TV, which is the other thing we make most of our students do, it's also largely flat. But if you look at sleep, the conclusion you can draw is that our students are often more awake when they're asleep than they are when we are teaching them. And if you take a look at homework or at lab work, you'll again find that students are very, very stimulated. So how we design our program is in many ways similar to the flipped classroom, where close to 90% of all the time that students spend is split half and half roughly between studying by themselves and then doing very, very organized collaborative work with content. And only 10% of the time that they spend is spent, we're working in a more traditional environment with tutors or TAs. And when we did this, we found that our outcomes or our students' performance was so high that they were 2.5 times more likely to qualify amongst the top 1% in the country than more traditional programs. Just to ponder on about the MOOCs once again, I think the point that I really want to leave behind is, and especially in addition to what was said before, is the MOOCs are another way to deliver information. I think what they've done is made the information world flat, as Vijay said. What's really important is that we spend a lot of time on figuring out what do students do with this information, which is really independent of how that information is delivered. It has a lot to do with how do we get our students to engage with each other, create knowledge, and push the boundaries of what they can learn. And when teaching becomes less about teaching knowledge, as it has in this world, and a lot more about teaching how to learn and how to create knowledge, you can start to create a world where you can de-link good education from subject expertise in the classroom, as we are finding. And all at once, we start to move to a paradigm where we don't need superheroes in our classrooms. We may just need coaches with great content delivered online who can help students learn that same content better and work together to create knowledge. And perhaps then, we can solve problems like we have in India of finding 1 million coaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ieche, for these great images and inspiring quotes. We now turn to our last panelist, Dr. El-Wahabi.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسوله وصحبه أجمعين. الأخوة والأخوات ضيوف الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني ورغبتي أن أتحدث باللغة العربية، لكن حيث أن الندوة غيرت في فورماتها في آخر اللحظات فمضطر أني أنتقل إلى اللغة الإنجليزية، لكن العربي أيضا موجود في الشرائح. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to participate in this panel, and I thank the organizers for their preparation and their well-selected for the speakers and the topics. In this particular discussion, there was a small changes in the last moment, which I hope we can grab in the. What I was planning to talk about is the changes in the higher education, especially in the e-learning, and some of the definitions and the confusions sometimes it happen. And then I will talk about these, some of the new trends in the e-learning that are shaping the future of knowledge societies. And I will focus it later at what we are doing in Saudi Arabia and how we are utilizing it, showing our strategy in order to utilize this new additive technologies and not disruptive to learning. The point that I may skip it is the changes on the higher education, focusing on the skills, focusing on the knowledge, focusing on the collaboration with the industry and with other part of the society, creating knowledge society, and also creating environment for collaborative in all aspects, especially the major 3 milestones that can characterize the modern higher education, contributing to build knowledge-based economy, and also engaging in service of the local communities but what's relevant to our discussion is the best utilization and effective application of new technologies in delivery mode of learning and teaching. And if we move further, we will focus on the three main things: the building knowledge-based economy, as I said, and the also utilizing the new technologies. Again, with this, we have to bring back our main challenges in the higher education, which are the expansion and the financing, and also the quality and the compatibility with the job market. Because we have to consider all these challenges while we are considering our future. Again, in the education and the learning environment, we have to take care about the new requirements for proposing an ecosystem for education, which has to take about, at least in my view, 4 things: talking about knowledge, talking about skills, talking about the effective globalizations, and also the leadership that we have. All this should be done in a balanced curriculum, should be done in collaboration with other parts of the society, and also focusing on the third mission of the social responsibility of the educational institutes. In my view, the most important issue here in this discussion is the knowing what we mean by these terminologies. A lot of things now are moving around: e-learning, online learning, open learning, lifelong learning, distance learning. And the problem is we want to distinguish between the concepts, the tools, technologies, and the processes. And unfortunately, most of the confusion happening if we did not define what do we mean. As we are saying, this is a mode of delivery, or this is a concept that we need to apply it through different mechanisms. If we are able to pinpoint at least a common ground of understanding, a lot of the confusion will be sorted out. Here are some of the common definitions. I don't want to go over these, but I think it is well known to all of the people who are in the field. But I think it is a prerequisite really for understanding the environment that we are talking about. Similarly, also there are different setups for all of these. And I don't have time to discuss many of the new trends in the e-learning that needs to be really utilized. And the main thing is taking it in the proper context and utilizing it in the proper conditions. One of them, as we said, is MOOCs, but this is not the big issue. I think the main distinction between the technologies, the learning, and acquiring the knowledge, and granting the degrees. I don't think in a lot of discussions going to be how to acquire more knowledge and more information and how to deliver it, the mode of delivery. All of these, I think, are very encouraging, and I think they're supposed to be going in the right direction to help our learners in all levels of education, either the general education or the higher education, or even in the outside the formal education in the context what they call lifelong learning. But the problem is when it comes to acquiring the degrees, what are the requirements? I think there should be some kind of new ways of assessment that it will guarantee the acquiring of the required knowledge in order really to move in different forms of granting certificates or granting degrees with the new form of learning. Otherwise, it will be a disruptive education system, in my view. Here are also some of the new trends that are being coming in the future, especially in the social learnings, the gamification also. All of these are very important tools to be utilized within the learning delivery. Some of these, maybe I don't have time to go over this, but maybe you will find it in the presentation. The last, I would like just to focus on the what we are doing in Saudi Arabia regarding this utilization for the future. As we know, we are moving through AFAQ, our main strategic plan, and as we explained it before, it's focusing on three important pillars, which are the expansion, the quality, and the differentiation. With the differentiation, we know that we create different system of universities, and also focusing on the quality and focusing on the expansion. Part of the quality is the e-learning and the utilizing the new mode of delivery that are utilized in all institutions. And these are just a small summary of what's the our strategy in general. For the e-learning, the kingdom started by establishing a natural a house of expertise, which is the National Center for E-Learning and Distance Learning, and also having capacity building by introducing this to all our universities and creating some deanships and also even some vice rectorship in order to take about the new mode of deliveries, and also focusing on training, introducing many of the new technologies also within all institutions. A new digital library system, huge ones being also established and launched and utilized fully, and also a new university, virtual or electronic university is being launched the last 2.5 years to take care also about the different audience that need for education with different delivery. This is some of the initiatives that have been launched for the e-learning center, and many of them have been proven to make really a best utilization of the new technologies. This is part of them, and also the establishing of the systematic reference for making bylaws for utilizing the distance learning, shifting towards blended learning, also even in the formal education, encouraging most of our also university to utilize the e-learning in their formal classes, and also the only granting now within coming 4 years, the only granting university for the degrees is the university, Saudi University, Electronic University. This is part of the also laws or the regulations that are being approved, and the universities are working with it, and it gives you the different part that this bylaw are addressing. What I can mention here that as a summary, there should be a distinction between acquiring the knowledge and the learning and the experiences, which should be no limit for it. But for granting the degrees, there should be a careful study for first improving the assessment in order to match with the new technologies before we go using the old assessment method for a new era of technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aouhali, for sharing with us impressive advance in the kingdom. I'd like now to start the discussion first among the panelists, and then we'll open to the audience. Some of the numbers we read about some of the MOOCs are staggering. University of London, their first MOOC, 200,000 students or people registered. But then when the course started, only 90,000 were present. And by the end of the course, only 9,000 completed. So I'd like to ask you the following question. What kind of recognition can we give to those who participate? Are they eligible for credits? Or is dropouts going to be a big issue? For badges? For degrees? Who would like to start? Michel.
I would say that the dropout is not the most important fact. So look at the social psychology course on Coursera, also 200,000 participants, 8,000 completed the course. But the first question we should ask is, why did the 192,000 did not follow the course? And one main reason is that in most cases you can achieve a kind of badge for this, but it's normally not integrated in regular study programs so far. If you have a course that is part of a curriculum or a regular study program, the number of students engaging in this course and the number of those who will finish the course will be quite higher than now. So because of the situation we have at the moment, the 200,000 of the University of London may be constituted by students, people on an island, retired persons who are interested in a course about, let's say, archaeology, but they do not want to have some kind of certificate. There may be some alumni that are interested, oh, what's the University of London doing in the field of archaeology? But if you change the mode for the integration of this course in that what we are regular doing, these numbers will change quite fast.
Thank you.
I think maybe I would like to approach this question differently. The question maybe we need to ask first, is this method applicable for all type of audience? And maybe we need to know why those people register in the first place. They have different motivations. Based on these different motivations, we can analyze the dropout or the changes or if they did not follow up. I think if we are trying to measure all these new technologies, what they call disruptive technologies, in the same approaches that we are measuring the high school graduates or the bachelor graduates or the amount of master degrees being granted, I think we are using different tools in different environments. So I think we have to make the distinction again between professional development, between formal learning, and you will see the difference. One size fits all here, I think, is a dangerous measure. We have to understand the different audience, different motivation, and also different tools.
Well, if I could pick on this issue, because the notion of one size fits all, the defendants of the BRIC universities, that when you have people are on campus, the students get individual attention tailored to their individual needs. How can you provide individual attention when you have 200,000 registered students?
So, first of all, I think just continuing with the answer and then I'll come to your question. First of all, I think as the other speaker said, the motivation when everybody came to the classroom was one, to complete the course and get a grade. The motivation when people joined the MOOCs was not the same. Okay, statistic, 60% of MOOC students are those who are already pursuing an undergraduate or a postgraduate program in a university. So for them it's remedial learning. For them completing the course is not important, maybe attending 2 lectures is important. The second, 40% of students, this 40 is not that of that 60, are from emerging economies. They had nothing to do with this. They just had a general interest in a particular area. Maybe they were considering joining this course sometime else or considering joining this university. So I think this only corroborates the fact that different people with different motivation. Second, though it's of a lesser consequence, I don't think the student has a skin in the game right now. It's free. So I can drop out, I can join whenever I want, but if I had paid the fee and the fee was not coming back and I had a purpose, then I wouldn't do that. So now answering your question about the 200,000, that if you have a class of 200,000, how will you give anybody individual detention? My rhetoric in that will be, my daughter went to Michigan and her first class of chemistry had 700 students in a lecture. The lecture was of course taken by a Nobel laureate, but she could have seen him on television or for all practical purposes anyway. 700 people in an auditorium listening to a lecture, you don't learn. So who does that? The graduate assistants do that, in the follow-up periods. Similarly, when I was explaining the cloud campus is MOOCs for delivery of instruction in one form, which is the expert faculty, but then there is a resident faculty at each location, which is hand-holding the student and giving him that personalized experience.
Any comments on this side?
So I think just to go back to our own experience, I think the important thing here really is, one is what's the motivation of the students joining, and the other end of this is, what do we feel the utility of the MOOCs is? What are we going to use them for? Because if we're going to use them primarily as a method of knowledge delivery, then to Vijay's point, I think there can be many methods of ensuring course completion. And many of them will be offline, will require human intervention. And I think that's probably the more realistic outcome of MOOCs in my mind. If we try to believe that MOOCs will replace or will be sort of a self-sufficient solution, I think that's when it starts to tread on dangerous ground, and that's when these numbers start to look really, really bad. So I think if you take the presumption that this is an efficient way of delivering great knowledge to many people, and we will need to create complementary institutions, and I think then the numbers aren't worrying because 8,000 more people got an education.
One more thing, may I add?
Let's perhaps give the floor to Michelle, and then we'll come back to you, Dr.
There's one interesting example concerning the proliferation of a lesson, like the chemical lesson you just mentioned. You saw the picture of Michael Sandel from Harvard University. So this is a very sophisticated lesson about justice. But when this lesson was offered San Jose State University in California, the students were worrying about the fact that they had to listen to, that's an original quote, to the upper class conversations of young students in Harvard. So they were not quite happy about this. And the same thing happens when, for example, Duke University exports lessons, let's say to China, or even they use the brand of the university in a context where the students of the home universities start to think about, what are you doing with our beautiful brand? What is the necessity to sell this brand to a central China city? So the two examples, I can give you 10 more, that it is education and academic education is not just about proliferation. It's a very important institution, it's a very important value, and you cannot substitute something like this, think of the forecast of Drucker, just by producing nice videos with Hollywood star-like professors running around like a movie star. That's nice to have, but someone said the name Humboldt, don't forget that.
Exactly, in similar directions. I was going to say, let's say, what's the phenomena of MOOCs? It's a recent phenomena. I cannot rule out there is a fashionable side of it, especially after some of the reputable university jump in this wagon and start, I cannot rule that part of reputation. Since it is free, many of you educators want to learn, why not? But as I said, this kind of fashionable You cannot roll also any type of business-oriented later on, as many of the things start free, later on you will be charged, and this is what we are seeing here. I think the technology advancement, the social learning also, all these are encouraging to go in that direction. But to move this from an social learning and professional development and knowing something new is different from when you take it as a formal part of learning that you get degrees on it. So this is the difference. Most of those people who are clicking there, it's not bricks versus clicks. It's a matter of let's try something new. But there should be something different from what they are used to do it. Thank you.
So two of you at least have mentioned when it's free and if it will start charging might become different. Georgia Tech is launching its engineering degree masters in as a MOOC online only, and they're going to be charging $14,000, which is I think a third or a fourth of the price of getting the same degree on campus. So do we have a viable new business model for higher education? Do we think that we can, I mean, if you think about it, it's quite expensive to design a new course, but it's almost free to, the marginal cost of adding one more student is zero. So do we have the magic answer now, the magic bullets to deal with the big issue of expansion of higher education, especially in the developing world? And well, are we going to see a trade-off between quantity and quality, or could we find the magic answer to the combination of both quantity and quality?
So I'll be brief. I think no. From everything that we've seen, I think if you even ask most students why they go to Harvard, or in the Indian context why they'd want to go to IIT, I don't think anyone is going to tell you I want to go to a top college to go listen to the professor. I think in most settings, much of learning in college comes from working with certain groups of people and having access to certain environments where you are stimulated to create. So I think unless you can somehow simulate that on a computer, which I don't think anyone's really done yet, I think the answer is no.
Michel, you agree?
Yes, the last report of the European University Association, we launched in January, so quite a new one, does say that there is no business model for MOOCs so far. And surprisingly, one example is taken from the United States, especially from Stanford, that the administration in Stanford said what Sebastian Thrun and other pioneers of the MOOC format said 2 years ago did not happen until today. Maybe our colleague from Hong Kong said, now it's just 2 years, so give them more time. But a single university, so Coursera and Udacity and edX, these are world platforms. So, but if a German or an Italian or a university in Saudi Arabia is thinking about should we engage in MOOCs, the university must know that this is a very, very expensive thing, especially according to maintenance. You can produce a video that's, some say it's 250,000 for one lesson, but maybe you can have it a little bit cheaper. But that's not the problem. You have to think about the maintenance. Like when you build a new academic building, it's not enough to have the money for building the rooms. You have to care for the maintenance, not only for the delivery. And that's a very central problem, because most people don't have time to engage in these enormous productions, because the requirements, especially from the platforms, in Germany it's diversity. It's again, you can't stand in front of a microphone. You have to engage in some drama techniques and all these things. That's what the people expect. So it's a kind of commercialization of academic features in part. Look at the BBC. The BBC has a tremendous amount of very good documentations. Why should the BBC not say, okay, now we are going to start a BBC MOOC format? Because the movies of them, they are excellent. They have good interviews, they have good slides, they have good pictures, they have a good grammar, they have a good story. And most of my colleagues don't even have a story, and they don't have the time to do it. So the chance for even smaller and medium-sized universities in MOOCs is only possible if you are part of a network that is interested in exchanging formats that are usable in several contexts for the university.
Vijay, you come from a country that has enormous needs in terms of higher education expansion.
Yeah. So having practiced technology-based learning for the last 30 years now, I can say whether a 3x benefit of economy of scale is possible for delivering the same effectiveness of learning. The answer is a resounding yes. However, I think we are, he was so right when he said there is e-learning, there is o-learning, there is, distance learning, and we just have so many. I think we need, MOOCs is just one component of that learning process. It's just one component. Knowledge delivery now in the new learning paradigm is just a very small component. And that by and large should be free in any case because it is available for free. The important question is how the overall learning is happening. And for that, I think you need to create a pedagogical framework which allows that to happen. When you do that, you can actually get results which are better than what we are discussing, and we have experienced those. So I would like us to, instead of discussing MOOCs, which is a placeholder for massive, large amount of learning to be delivered, not online, but in a manner that it is very, very inexpensive. And if we were to call that, give a different term to it and call it, I don't know if I'm stealing somebody's term, 21st century learning, because open learning, distance learning, e-learning, web learning, all those are now passé. They're all old terminologies. We need a terminology which is a set of all these, and I'm sure somebody would have come up with that, but I just thought for this discussion, if we can make MOOCs equal to a sum and substance of all the learning processes. If that has to be done, then many other things have to be done in addition to just giving a lecture on the video, which is, I think, what the other two gentlemen are also saying.
What do you think in the audience? Any comment, question? Yes, please.
Hello? Yeah.
We need a mic.
Yeah.
I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to move. Or if you have the mic already, go ahead.
Yeah, they have a mic.
Briefly, in conclusion, we can say that the innovation is centered in not conveying or delivering the knowledge, but rather creating people who can create knowledge and reach to knowledge. If taking this into consideration, and somebody in the morning have said the ingredients is a lot, the infrastructure, the support, the autonomy in the organization, good faculties, good even candidate in the student. My question is perhaps to the Saudi panel member, Dr. Auhali, or anybody who's a Saudi responsible in the Ministry of Higher Education. Don't you think the quantity is more important than the quality? Meaning that instead of spreading in the number of universities in every region, in every city, and perhaps more than one in each city, which is acceptable in certain time and era, but I would say if we want innovation, as it is the theme of this symposium, we need to, somebody also said in the morning, merging universities together to solidify and intensify resources for them to be innovative and to have an in-depth ability to create knowledge creators. So my question is, we have so many universities and it's still in the Excel of opening, and they're all very superficial when it comes to the ability to make innovatives. innovators, inventors, because we still lack the infrastructure in these universities, the basic resources, the quality teachers, even the proper preparation for the higher education candidate. So how can we going to solve both dilemmas, spreading higher education in the city, yet with the depth of aim in innovations and invention and inventors, so forth? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I think
Dr. Aziza Rajab again.
It's a smart question, but I think it's good opportunity for me to answer it. I think you cannot find a best time to say that you can go expand both and go vertically and horizontally better than this time, because you have the tools and the ability and the capability to do this both. In our strategy, we have three thrusts. We said expansion, quality, and mission differentiation. And when you look that all these are going together, or linked together, should be saying, that you can see that the expansion cannot be with the jeopardize of quality. And the same thing, creating the ecosystem of within the universities, that it allow some of them to go with formal education, which will encourage later on the innovation in that education sector. Again, with these new technologies, these internet also linkages, these social learning groups and networks, you will be able, even if it is a remote area, even if you don't have a full capacity of faculty member, now you can share some good courses in the West or the East, or even within the University of Saudi Arabia, that it will substitute the lack or the of some of the faculty members in that particular region. But we are not only just caring about this. When you create a university, when you create an institution for higher education in a region, you are bringing many of the development, not only just education. You are bringing a lot of development in that region, that it will be the higher education will be the driver change for development in that region. And you cannot make the development if you don't have all formal of education, starting from the general and reaching to the higher education.
Thank you. Michel, you wanted to add something?
Just another fact that came to my mind during you gave the answer to this smart question. In Saudi Arabia, you are a very, very young country. Yeah? Germany, Japan are very, very old countries. So in Germany, the average age of the population is moving toward 50. So what is happening at our universities? Until the end of this decade, we will still have a lot to do with the demand of our younger generation. But in the second half of this decade, we have to look for good offers in the field of continuing education for people that are already retired, people that are already in profession, that they do not have the time to come to the university day by day, so they need a new concept in the sense of a good temporal concept. When is it possible to listen to a lesson in let's say business administration or whatever? And that's the challenge for a lot of European universities today. They have to recognize that the young generation will not be the only pillar of the academic institution in the future, and therefore it's interesting to think about what can MOOCs play in this context if we are looking at different target groups. That's another important thing.
Thank you. I'm going to take 2 or 3 comments and then we'll ask panelists to answer. Yes, please.
Dr. Ohali, do you think this flat world and removing the bricks and can live with this very, very tight bylaws?
Sorry, can you
I mean, they are all speaking about the flat world education and no more bricks, and the university will change in the century. This needs much more flexible bylaws to allow this to happen.
Definitely.
Okay, let me, if you will allow me, Dr. Mohammed, I will take one more comment, two more comments. Behind you, there was no. Jan?
I would like to ask a question on a little bit of the reflection, if it's allowed, the relationship between technology and education in the larger sense, or the technology and the human being in general. I don't want to be too philosophizing, but I think that if we look at the relations between us and technology, over the number of generations of technology, there is a certain lesson from it. I remember that just after the war, there was a lot of, and my organization, UNESCO, was directly involved in creation of the radio university. The spreading of the knowledge via radio would be the fantastic mean to democratize the access to information, to education. Afterwards came television, and we have the TV. We have, the next stage was the open university via video, media, and now we have another technology which is coming. And I think that we are master in a certain way of the earth because we were so adaptable, and will come another technology in which we will also be quite comfortable, not individually, but as a civilization. If you look at the other technologies and what other technologies also claim that we will, for example, we'll have a paperless offices. You know, when the Xerox came and the others, and what do we see? That we use more papers than we even dream about it. You know? So, and I think, and now I return to the university, somewhat this institution, which has the history millennial or even more, and certainly in India even more, was very adaptive one. You know, I don't say that it will be, I don't want to sound like a ludist that I reject the technology. No. I claim that if you look at the modern student, and it doesn't matter if it will be at Harvard, Oxford, and in the kingdom, resembles a little bit, if we would look at him from the perspective of the past, he would be in the virtual mode anyway. He communicates with the administration, with his tutor, mostly via emails and all the things. So I think that the university as an institution will adopt. And I come back to what your opening remarks, Jamil. It's not so bad that the universities are not changing too much, because it has a certain role. I always claim that universities is stuck between past and the future, and it has to be response to the challenges of the future, which we don't know yet. And at the same time, it has this value. We like those traditional universities. Don't forget about this also, this experience which we enjoy going to the university, to the library, to those halls where we have where we find almost our roots, you know, and our identity is confirmed. So I think that I think that the MOOCs is something very positive. It has a special role. It has a fantastic perspective, I think, also for this, if there is a desire for acquiring of the knowledge. Not forget that it requires enormous self-discipline, which I would say at a certain age, if you look at the age, education, and MOOCs, it's not so easy, you know. The attention span of the young people is not that particularly great one. So I think that it is something which is very important. It brings the fresh little bit of the wind, you know. And I think that this will enriched offer of the universities. But I don't think that it will change in the dramatic way that Druckers, it's not the only one who claimed that the university will disappear. I think that I'm much more having the faith about adaptivity of the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. So two very important questions. The first one is about governance and flexibility. And the second one is, in a way, from my interpretation, are the MOOCs really game changers? Is it just the next technology after radio, TV, etc., or is there something fundamentally different? We're going to get some answers and then we'll go back for questions upstairs.
In an answer to the question, definitely, I do believe that all these kind of governance should match the new developments, either in the scale of education institutions, as well as also the mode of deliveries and the mode of governance also. Definitely, this is an important issue that it should take care of this. In particular, in Saudi Arabia, as you know, there are a lot of autonomies in that regard. And also a new concept has been applied as learning organizations between the institutions and the Ministry of Higher Education. And for this, a lot of consultation regarding reaching the best policies to be adopted by agreeing upon it, or at least in informal discussions about it before it being a formal policy. This has been a better way of servant also coming to agreed policy that it will help for a certain time, and also again after a while it needs a modification or a change or something like this. But I do agree that it should be matching the advances in both mode of delivery as well as changing of institutions' policies.
Thank you. On the second point, who wants to? Okay.
So just to the second point around, so I'm going to sound a little self-contradictory at this point, but I think while I don't think to Jay's point, I think while I don't think the current format of MOOCs is a viable business model, I do think there is something inherently very disruptive about what's happened with knowledge transfer. Because I think the universities will change, and I think what will change will be the role of the professor. Because I think if we think of what we do through educational systems, when I work mostly with high school students, and it's been, I think you go 5 or 10 years back, it would be ludicrous to imagine that a high schooler who was 16 or 15 years old could actually do any kind of new research. This was something which would be ludicrous. It would just never be possible because that person would never have access to information. I think that's changed. We're seeing increasingly that high schoolers are doing research, that they can work in the environment normally reserved for graduate or postgraduate students. So I do think the role of professors will change, and I think the role of how early we feel students can really start engaging in scientific endeavor, and that's a space that I know a little bit better, will change. So I do think the university will be transformed. Will it go away? I don't think so, but it will be transformed.
Michel?
I just want to add that we have a long tradition of learning machines, for example. So going back to Ramelli in the 16th century, but yeah. So in this respect, MOOCs might be part of some kind of continuous innovation, maybe something that is done during a transforming period where we do not know what the end of this transformation process really is. But if you look at the organizational change in delivering knowledge, then you might think about that universities may become may look at new competitors in the near future. So if you look at Coursera, for example, this is, in fact, it's a network of mostly US American universities, and this network is growing and growing all over the world. In Germany, we have a small platform called iVersity. By the way, they are all playing with semantics. iVersity, it's my university. Udacity comes from audacity. Coursera is the course era. So maybe we will have, like the private academies in Europe, that you now will have a new competitor in the near future. challenging the universities, and then the universities, I agree with you that they will adapt to this new competitive field. They will not disappear.
ieche.
So first of all, is MOOCs a game changer? I will reiterate, MOOCs is one component of so many things which are happening. Is technology-based learning a game changer? Most certainly. I don't think it is something that we should look away from, because it solves the problem of access, equity, quality, all three of them. Second, we must also realize that many other things have changed. The nature of knowledge has changed. The nature of the student has changed. He is able to do research in class 12. He's of a different kind. So if we keep one end of the spectrum, which means the blackboard side of the equation the same, and keep changing the classroom side of the equation, I think the twain will never meet. So it is important for us to realize that the ways by which learning is transferred from one part to another has to change, and technology has a very, very important role to play. So in my opinion, technology-based learning is a game changer.
Thank you. Let's go back to the ladies upstairs. Yes, please.
Yes, salam alaikum. There are so many comments we have said, just learn from you, and we wish to tell you the situation in Saudi Arabia. The social aspect or the view of the society, all the new generation tend to apply for higher education. I mean, the whole crowd is queuing to get university degree, but our society, our need the market. We are still having lots of professions which are not needed to spend so many years in the university and get satisfied or what our society needs. This is one thing I wish that we consider. The university is part of the society, and we need to prepare what our market needs, what our profession, which doesn't need so many years. I could just give you an example because I have been with this type. We used to have university degree for nursing. The girl will stay maybe 6 years to become a Bachelor of Nursing. And we also need much bigger number of assistant nursing, which doesn't need more than 5 years as a secondary school level, and she become an assistant nurse. Now, because our society needs that we all have a university degree, we canceled the view about having a nurse which only needs 6 years to be a professional assistant nurse. Now we go to the technology. We say that everybody would apply distant learning, electronic learning, and they will be passing the exam. Okay, who are the people who pass? Who are the people who are evaluating them? I wish that we consider all this to say that universities should not be open to accommodate the millions of students, while the market needs a smaller profession, which we should give it proper attention, and we give them a nice, high quality, high expert to do a plumbing business, a painting, or industry. This is something I wish our university consider that. And of course, continuing education is very depending on electronic follow-up or continuing education. So I wish our universities consider this as a homogeneous needs of the society. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for a very enlightening and rich discussion. I come from industry, and while universities are always being a hub for innovation, breakthrough ideas, and critical accomplishments and achievements, I would like just to ask the distinguished panelists, what's the best way for establishing and maintaining and institutionalizing an effective strategic partnership between industry and the higher education at large? There ought to be an alignment and synergy between these two great forces in the society at large, and there are different experimentations on how best to manage the relationship. It's not easy, it can be complex too. These are two different worlds sometimes. But with emphasis on innovation and technology, industry and business at large bring ideas and thoughts that can be extremely essential for the success and the mission of universities. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment or question? Yes, please.
Thank you. There's one issue that I haven't heard yet, is the language issue. At the moment, as far as I know, all the MOOCs are offered in English. What I would like to know from the panel, is that a good thing? What about the whole of Latin America, the whole of Asia, the whole of the Middle East, where English, people may not be very comfortable in English? I understand you can translate, you can modify MOOCs and so on, but that again, can you really translate something that has been created in a very Anglophone and very different environment onto your own environment? Is that easy to do? Thank you.
Thank you. 3 key questions, comments. Dr. Mohammed, would you like to take the first one, please?
I think 3 different issues. I may go discussing. Sure. I agree the importance, and as I highlighted, that one of the new trends in higher education is bringing the gap between higher education institutes and the society, and in particular, the industrial and the service side. I think this is an important direction that it should be taking some serious step towards this, and the collaboration can be different in many forms. First of all, addressing the industrial issues and problems, also the participation of some of the experts in the industry in the designing of a curriculum, or at least making some of the education delivery of the courses. The training of the students in the industry also is an important issue, exposing the student to the challenges in the industry in order to be part of the problems that are solvable within the education system. All this, I think, some of the tools that it can bring this to end. Regarding the language of the MOOCs, and this is maybe another point that I will add, I think we should, in my view, that the media play an important role for making a MOOC is one of the fashionable things in the last 3 years. And I can tell you, for all these fashionable things, there will be an apex, then will be a drop. And we will see, and we have seen, especially after these reports of the not completing the courses, and also people realizing that the different motivations are not fulfilled and satisfied by the MOOCs, you will see this is going to be fading out until it comes to a natural level where it's going to be people utilizing it according to their needs. But we cannot say MOOCs is the solution for everything. We cannot say MOOCs is suitable for everybody who wants to learn. We cannot say MOOCs is suitable for all professionals. So this kind of thing, I think, is very dangerous to generalize it and to make it a way or roadmap for the future. But other things that we should be considering, all these collectively together, is the one that's making the change. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Michael, how do you say MOOCs in German?
MOOCs. But coming back to the language question, because it's a very interesting question. In the last European University Association report, there are 2 maps about the number of MOOCs coming from different countries. So it's surprising that, for example, the University of Lausanne very early started to engage in the field of MOOCs. Today, one reason for this is that the administration of Lausanne is thinking about bringing MOOCs to the French-speaking countries in Africa. If you look at this map from Coursera, there are only a few MOOCs that are, let's say, produced for the African continent. And the number of MOOCs produced in Spain is growing too. So I believe that the market for this MOOCs is Middle and Southern America. And with the, well, English is another dominant, that's clear. But it's interesting to see that they are looking for language claims. Huh?
Actually,
so I think quickly on the language issue, because we, in our work in India, deal with 3 different languages, I feel. We work in the south where they speak Tamil. We work in predominantly a Hindi-speaking belt and a Marathi-speaking belt. And I think what's often ignored, and as Michelle said, was I think Brazil has one of the most successful distributed university systems, which is primarily catering in Portuguese to the Brazilian people. So I think there will be plenty of local startups or local competitors to the large Coursera's and the Udacity, primarily on the fact that they'll be regionalized, they'll be contextual, and they'll be lingually working for people. The other issue that I did want to address, which came from the above, was, I think it's a very important question, is do we really need more university graduates? And again, I think from our experience of working predominantly with underserved or low-income students, I think one of the things that's most irksome to those who don't have, I think people are realizing increasingly that what the university degree stands for, which is your ability to continually grow in your career, to innovate, to come up with new things, is what is increasingly becoming valuable in the workplace. I think even though you can get by and get a job with significantly lower levels of skill, I think unless we can at least provide people access to this ability of having true upward mobility, I think we're significantly underserving our people, because I think in the least every person everywhere should have the choice, should be able to make the choice to rise through the ranks to whatever level that they want to do. And I think restricting them by saying that we are only going to create a certain number of university seats is unfair.
ieche.
So first, I just thought I'll give a technical response to the language question. So I think he has already covered the fact that you have MOOCs coming up in multiple languages. But suppose the subject that I want to learn is only available in Spanish. In that case, as far as I'm concerned, is that MOOCs not good for me because I don't know Spanish. All I want to say is technologically we solve that problem in India, because in India we have 29 languages, 15 official and 14 others. So many times we have to work between languages. We found technological solutions where in an asynchronous mode, you can make a recorded video, which is what MOOCs will be finally about, a recorded video, culturally sensitive and language-wise translatable, very easily using a technology engine. And that is a possibility that tomorrow may be available, because if the superstar professor who's speaking only knows one particular language, then it's not right that we should deny that access to others. And technologically that is possible. I wanted to respond to the industry linkage question. According to me, higher education has to have a stronger and stronger linkage with industry, and I was very happy to see the response that came from the minister. So in NIT University, where we are practicing a very strong industry linkage, we not only work with an industry in designing a course which will make sure that at the end of the course, the person is first day, first star ready. So the university adapts itself to the needs of the industry and aligns its credit system and courses so that the people are company ready when they join that particular course, when they graduate from that particular course. This, in return, the industry provides, as I mentioned, practicing professors. These are practitioners who come and become professors in the university, and likewise the university sends professing practitioners, which are professors who are sent on a sabbatical into the industry. And therefore, together, at least in the area of banking and finance, in this particular case, in a business school, our university has really risen in the ranks in terms of the capability that it has built. So it's a win-win case. And therefore, I couldn't I couldn't amplify that more by saying that industry linkage is an extremely important thing.
We're getting almost to the end of the program. I'm going to do a
One
last
more
round
comment.
of comment question. Yes, please.
We took the comment about, or the question about the language differently. He said the Anglo language, and we're talking here not the literal language, but the higher education language, the culture of the universities, and the experiences and the knowledge of Anglo can be implemented in the Middle East and Arab and Far East. I think it happened. Because looking back at 5 years from now, at the same symposium, the first one, the panel speaker and the guest speakers were all from the North American, or most, majority, North American and European. Today, I see more Far East experiences and guest speakers from Singapore, Tokyo, China, and so forth. So there are a shift in the educational and higher education language and experience and modalities and methodologies from the North American and European, even if it is gained originally from there. The shift is in the fruitful experiences that the new speaker and the shift is bringing to the region. So, and the region globally will adapt anything that is successful, regardless to the language, because there is a language of invention and higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Altbach?
I wanted to make two reactions. One is to extend Ghulam's important question about language, because it's not, I think, only language, but it's also the methodology, it's the orientation, it's the academic background, it's the paradigms, which the MOOC courses largely, which are coming from the United States and Europe at this point, reflect. So the rest of the world, insofar as they use those courses, are being, you might call it the neo-colonialism of the willing. Yeah. That is, they are adapting, using the methodologies which we invent and which are, of course, useful in our system, but we don't worry about what's useful in somebody else's system. So how do you make the translation not only of the language, which maybe can be solved by the sort of thing that India does so well, but also the mentality. And as has been pointed out by many of our speakers, producing MOOCs it isn't rocket science, but it's not easy to produce good ones that are going to be engaging and are going to make the user, whether he or she is a student or a retired person or someone in industry, wanting to stay through to the end. And of course, there is a problem with that. So it would be interesting to hear some reflections on that. My other comment, which is just a comment, is I, like Professor Sadlak, don't think that the universities, particularly the world-class ones, the sort of top of the league, are going to be dramatically changed either by this revolution, so-called revolution, or by other things. They will be quite similar to what exists today. And I myself, and they will adapt, as they have over the centuries. What happens in universities today is different, although similar. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. The higher education worldwide is stratified. It's differentiated. And as some of our speakers have already pointed out, I think the challenge is in the middle of those institutions which are going to have to figure out a new mission with changing labor markets, with oversupply of graduates in some places and unemployment, with the demographic changes in some of the northern countries that have been discussed. And by the way, Japan and increasingly in China are being faced with the same issues. So I think it's this middle range. And at the bottom, the vocationally oriented institutions may be using information technology in creative ways, will also, I think, do pretty well. So it's the great middle that's the challenge.
Thank you. I would like now to ask each one of our panelists to comment on these 2 points, or one of the 2 points, and give your closing statements. And we'll go in reverse order. So we'll start with you, Dr. Mohammed.
What I can say that I think all these new changes and advances, either in technologies or in mode of delivery, should be a plus and utilized fully to be an additive technologies rather than just disruptive to the way that been developed. And we should take it to the full extent, utilizing it in the better sense, not to forget the ethics of learning and also the values that should be included with it. Thank you.
To take one or two more questions. Have one here.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment the question that was raised earlier, or the comment about the fact that university degrees tend to be very long, and the interesting idea of using technology to complement the degree development. And I think as the earlier session today talked about innovative models for higher education, I think trying to, rather than duplicating things online or trying to use technology to do the same thing differently, I think the concept that was raised by the ladies upstairs of having shorter courses, but perhaps within the same program, the option of continuing on professional development through something online or some kind of technology-based learning, using these two things in an integrated way and a complementary way, is something we really haven't discussed here. You know, it's a very different model, and I think this notion of very long degree programs is problematic in many parts of the world, because long degrees are difficult to complete because of personal reasons, for many reasons. So I thought that what was raised before, and there wasn't much response to it, but I think it's really a comment worth exploring or having some discussion about. Thank you.
Okay. One more comment? No? So back to our... Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my appreciation is also extended to your talented panelists and to the Ministry of Higher Education for convening and arranging this conference. If I can start first by hopefully being able to recommend, if there is a conference next year, that one of the themes of the conference be how higher education can improve general education. How higher education and research can improve general education, pre-university and pre-college level. That's number one. Now, I appreciate the gentleman's comment about class 12 students being able to use research because of the internet and because of this digital age that we are going through. The thing is, even in the old days, if you had a school with a sophisticated library, students would be able to do that. Maybe the cost was more then. The issue mainly is now is quantity. And maybe with quantity, quality is affected. But for these youngsters, shouldn't we be worried for safety from the ages of 10 to 18 of being exposed to these gadgets and the radiation that this might cause for their health at these young ages? Second of all, I'll give you an example. Today with the iPad, the youngsters can easily search for a word. But how does that reinforce their ability to spell? It does not. It gives them a word that's ready. But if you go back to the conventional way by using a dictionary, and you might say I'm old-fashioned, But if you use the dictionary, number one, the word doesn't pop out quickly. Number two, you stumble along the way with other words, and there are curious students who want to stop and see, what is this word? So they increase the quantity of their vocabulary. And third of all, with the dictionary, you learn how to split the word into separate syllables. And so that you reinforce your ability to spell. So, I mean, this is too much technology. We mustn't forget people like Gates and people like Steve Jobs. Of course, they will be remembered in histories for the next thousands of years. But they themselves did not reach what they reached without the old school and without the old foundation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Mohammed, would you like to add any more comments? So we'll go to Ieche.
Okay. So, and closing remarks.
Yes,
well, right?
please.
So I think, thank you for the question. I think it feeds, and I'm going to be a little provocative here, but I think, if you look at what's happening to the world, and I think the challenge we're having, especially with younger students, is I really believe is we're not challenging them enough, and by an order of magnitude. I think skills that we valued for the longest time, spelling, basic numeracy, arithmetic, are all completely redundant and obsolete in today's world. Like, no one's ever going to require you to actually correctly spell a word for any practical application in the future. Similarly, no one's ever going to ask you to multiply a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. But I completely agree with you, but with technology, when these skills are not taught anymore and you don't challenge the student to do things which are much harder, then you're kind of creating this vacuum where kids are bored, they're distracted, they're doing all kinds of strange things. So leading into the question on shortening of university time spans, I think if we are thoughtful about how we structure what students work on at younger and younger ages, recognize the fact that they can do a lot more now that they have access to a lot of technology, and say that maybe the first 3 years of college don't ever need to exist anymore. Maybe kids can really start doing that much earlier, potentially enter the workforce at the age of 17, because they've already acquired or pushed themselves to a point where they could come back for a 2-year degree at some stage and do something much more remarkable. So I think in terms of what will get disrupted with information becoming freer and with technology replacing conventional skills that they needed to spend years acquiring, is I think we will just progress much, much, much faster as humanity if we let people do that.
Thank you. PJ?
So I would first like to reiterate the fact that technology-based learning has a very huge role to play, not only a huge role to play, so I don't think we should believe it's a choice, but it's an imperative. The second thing is that you can actually create a learning environment which is superior to the learning that is happening now. The third, which I should have mentioned before, was over a period of time, as more and more sciences and more hard subjects have evolved, and our focus has been on learning on those, the good news is technology-based learning can make all those routine automated and keep them out. Where we are missing out, and I notice this in NIT University when I see fresh students coming out of high schools and getting into the university, there are people who have forgotten how to ask questions. There are people who have forgotten how to understand a fellow human being. There are people who have forgotten how a bird sings, or why is a leaf green. I mean, there are these fundamental human values and nature forces which students don't learn. So I wish we could use more technology for those that could be automated and use more humans for those where we are missing out. So that's my...
Michael.
Well, coming back to the quality of education and research, the president of Hong Kong University mentioned it today, that his university is engaging in MOOCs because they want to see whether there is something that you can use for the classical way of teaching in the university. So in this respect, MOOCs are a kind of testing new ways of teaching and learning. But until today, we have to acknowledge that there are only a few good MOOCs where participation is really possible, and that the field is still dominated by the so-called MOOCs, the lessons, the massive component, and maybe this must change so that this kind of new learning technique might reach a higher acceptance in our university classes.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants for your insightful comments and questions, and our panelists who really brought us a lot to understand better this phenomenon. I will not try to summarize what they have said or to conclude whether we are now convinced that the MOOCs are the solution of the future or whether it's just another fashion. I think what was very important in this debate is that we talked about pedagogy. And I think that's the merit of the MOOCs debate. It has forced us to think about pedagogy, about the changing needs of the learners, about the new millennial learners, to use your expression, Vijay. I think that's very important. And as Phil was mentioning about the middle of the range institutions, you know, your traditional teacher will be confronted by the students, because if the students listen to the top professor from Harvard, from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, at least even in the X mode, they can see that it can be done differently. And then they go back to the traditional way and say, why do I have to put up with this old-fashioned approach? And I think what you underline is the resistance of the teacher. That's maybe the biggest hurdle. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our